December 20, 1875, Clearwater Creek, Colorado Territory. The bitter mountain air cut through wool and leather alike as snow began to gather on the lone pine outside Zara Keller's window. At 20 years old, with dark chestnut hair that fell in soft waves past her shoulders, she had the kind of beauty that seemed out of place in a rough mining town like Clearwater Creek. Her skin was still too smooth, her eyes too bright, to belong to a woman who had spent her life on the frontier. With fingers that trembled from more than just the cold, Zara dipped her pen into the inkwell one last time and finished the letter. "I cannot stay any longer. By Christmas morning I will be gone. Please do not search for me. My time in the West was never meant to last. With sincere regret, Zara." She blew gently on the ink, folded the paper with practiced precision, and addressed it simply. Thomas Calloway, C. Ranch. The neat script belied the chaos in her heart. Zara placed the note on the small desk in her rented room above the millinery shop where Mrs. Peterson would surely find it after she had departed on tomorrow's eastbound train. 3 months in Colorado Territory had taught her all she needed to know about the West. It was no place for a city-raised orphan with dreams of security. No place for a woman who had foolishly believed that answering a newspaper advertisement for a schoolteacher might lead to stability. No place to give her heart to a cowboy who could never offer the security she had spent her whole life seeking. Thomas Calloway believed in only one thing, that a man's worth was measured by the land he claimed and the cattle he ran. At 25, he had already carved out the beginnings of a respectable ranch 10 miles outside town, with 200 head of cattle and ambitious plans to double that by next year. His lean face was tanned from endless days under the Colorado sun, his eyes the same impossible blue as the summer sky. Unlike many of the rough men who populated the territory, his clean-shaven jaw and careful speech hinted at an education he rarely spoke about. What Thomas Calloway didn't believe in was putting down roots that couldn't be pulled up if necessary. The frontier had taught him that permanence was an illusion. His parents' Nebraska homestead had been washed away in a flash flood when he was 14, taking them with it. He'd survived because he'd been in town that day, and he'd spent the decade since then ensuring he never became too attached to anything that couldn't be abandoned in an hour's notice. Including a schoolteacher with eyes that reminded him of eastern forests and a laugh that made him forget, momentarily, that the West was no place for the kind of love that lasted. The morning of December 21st dawned clear and cold, the kind of brittle winter day that made every sound crack like a whip. Thomas guided his horse down Clearwater Creek's main street, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. He wasn't supposed to see Zara until the town's Christmas celebration in 4 days, but something had been strange in her voice when they'd parted after Sunday services, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to check on her. Mrs. Peterson was sweeping the boardwalk in front of her shop when he dismounted. "Morning, Mrs. Peterson." He touched the brim of his hat. "Miss Keller around?" The older woman's expression clouded. "She left for the general store about an hour ago, said something about needing to post a letter." She leaned on her broom. "That girl's been packing up her things, Mr. Calloway. I believe she might be planning to leave town." The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. "Leave, did she say that?" "Not in so many words, but I've seen enough people come and go in this town to recognize the signs. Mrs. Peterson lowered her voice. "There's a letter upstairs on her desk, has your name on it." Thomas took the stairs 2 at a time, his spurs jingling with each step. The room Zara had occupied for the past 3 months was neat as always, but the open trunk at the foot of the narrow bed confirmed Mrs. Peterson's suspicions. Carefully folded dresses and books were stacked inside, ready for travel. The letter sat in the center of the small desk, his name visible in Zara's elegant script. Thomas picked it up, something cold settling in his chest as he read the few lines. "Gone by Christmas, don't search for her, never meant to last." He was still standing there, letter in hand, when the door opened behind him. Zara froze in the doorway, a small package from the general store clutched to her chest. She wore her best traveling dress, a deep blue wool that made her eyes seem larger, more vulnerable. The color drained from her face when she saw Thomas standing by her desk, the letter unfolded in his hand. "You weren't supposed to find that until tomorrow." Her voice was steady, though her fingers tightened around her package. "I was going to leave it with Mrs. Peterson." "Were you going to say goodbye to my face?" Thomas asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "Or just disappear on the morning train?" Zara closed the door behind her and set her package on the bed. "I thought it would be easier this way." "Easier for who, Zara?" She met his eyes then, and the sadness in them made his chest ache. "For both of us. You have your ranch, Thomas, your cattle, your plans to expand west to the river valley, and I have to go back east where I belong." "Who says you belong there?" He stepped toward her, the letter still clutched in his hand. "You've been teaching those children for 3 months. They adore you. The town needs you." "The town will find another teacher." She turned away, moving to the trunk and adjusting a stack of books that needed no adjusting. "The school board chairman already told me. They received 2 inquiries last week from qualified teachers looking to move west in the spring." "And what about me?" Thomas asked quietly. "Will I find another you?" Her hands stilled on the books. "You never had me to begin with, Thomas." The words hung between them, honest and painful. They had never spoken of what existed between them, the lingering glances, the way he found excuses to escort her home from Sunday services, the books of poetry she lent him that he read by lamplight, thinking of her voice. They had shared no more than the brief touch of hands, yet something profound had grown between them, something neither had been brave enough to name. "Why are you really leaving, Zara?" Thomas set the letter down on the desk. "The truth." She turned to face him, her composure finally breaking. "Because I cannot build a life on uncertainty. I came west because the teaching position promised a steady wage, a respectable place in the community. I thought I could make a home here." Her voice caught. "But everything in this territory is temporary. The mines will dry up, the town will empty. Even you, Thomas, you speak of your ranch as if it's just one step on your journey. Nothing here is built to last." Thomas recognized the fear in her eyes. It mirrored his own. The fear of committing to something permanent in a place where permanence was a dangerous illusion. "Not everything has to be temporary," he said softly. "Doesn't it?" She gestured to the window where Clearwater Creek spread below them, a collection of mostly wooden structures carved into the mountain valley. 3 buildings burned down last month. The Wilkins family packed up and left after Mr. Wilkins was injured in the mine. Mrs. Thompson's husband was killed by outlaws on the South Road. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. "I have spent my entire life seeking stability, Thomas. The orphanage, the boarding school where I trained to be a teacher, all of it was meant to lead to a secure future. I cannot build that future in a place where everything feels like it could disappear overnight." "Including you," her eyes seemed to say. Thomas understood then. It wasn't just the West she feared committing to. It was him, a man who kept his distance, who never spoke of tomorrow, who had built his life around the premise that nothing lasted. "The eastbound train leaves at 9 tomorrow morning," she said quietly. "I've already purchased my ticket." Thomas nodded slowly, his mind racing. He wanted to tell her to stay, to give the West, to give him a chance. But what right did he have to ask that of her when he himself had never been willing to risk building something permanent? "I respect your decision," he said at last, though the words felt like stones in his mouth. "But I'd like to see you before you go. Have dinner with me tonight at the hotel restaurant, a proper goodbye." Hesitation flickered across her face before she nodded. "I suppose I owe you that much." "You don't owe me anything, Zara." He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "But I'd like the chance to say farewell properly." After he left, Zara sank onto the edge of her bed, staring at the letter he had returned to her desk. She had planned her departure so carefully, timed it to avoid the pain of seeing the disappointment in his eyes. Now she would have to face him across a dinner table and explain why she couldn't stay, why she couldn't risk her heart on a man and a place that offered no guarantees. But hadn't she already risked it? The ache in her chest as she watched him ride back toward his ranch told her the truth she had been avoiding. Leaving would not protect her heart. That damage was already done. The Clearwater Hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in town, which wasn't saying much by Eastern standards. But the tables were covered with clean linens, the silverware polished, and the menu offered more than the standard fare of the local saloons. Thomas had reserved a table in the corner, away from the curious eyes of the townspeople who would certainly notice the rancher dining with the schoolteacher. He stood when Zara entered, struck anew by her beauty. She had changed into a deep green dress that brought out the flecks of amber in her eyes, her hair swept up in a style more elaborate than her usual simple arrangement. She looked like she already belonged back east in some grand city where such finery was commonplace. "You look beautiful," he said simply as he held her chair. "Thank you." She settled across from him, her gloved hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You clean up rather well yourself." It was true, Thomas had taken unusual care with his appearance, wearing the one good suit he owned, reserved for church services and occasional business in Denver. His dark hair was neatly combed, his boots polished to a shine. They ordered their meals, beef steak for him, chicken for her, and fell into an awkward silence that had never existed between them before. Always they had found conversation easy, ranging from books to local politics to humorous observations about their neighbors. Tonight, with the shadow of her departure between them, words seemed inadequate. "Tell me about where you're going," Thomas said finally. "Do you have a position waiting?" "Not specifically," she admitted, "but I have letters of recommendation from the school board, and teaching positions open frequently in Philadelphia. I have a friend from the orphanage who lives there now, married to a banker. She's offered me a place to stay until I find employment." "Sounds like you've thought it through." "I have," she took a sip of water. "It's the sensible choice." "Sensible," he echoed, studying her face in the soft lamplight. "Is that what you want your life to be, Zara? Sensible?" A flash of something, irritation perhaps, or defensiveness, crossed her features. "What's wrong with wanting security, stability? Not everyone thrives on uncertainty, Thomas." "There's nothing wrong with wanting those things. But there's no such thing as true security, not even back east. Banks fail, businesses close, illness and accidents happen everywhere. At least there, I won't have to worry about my home burning down because the nearest water source is half a mile away," she countered. "Or outlaws raiding the town because the nearest law enforcement is in Denver." "Sheriff Davies would be offended to hear you discount his authority," Thomas said with a small smile. "You know what I mean." Their food arrived, offering a brief reprieve from the tension. Thomas watched as Zara cut her chicken into precise pieces, her movements betraying her refined upbringing despite her orphan status. He had always admired her composure, her quiet dignity. She'd brought those qualities to her teaching, earning the respect of even the most unruly children in Clearwater Creek. "I understand why you feel you need to leave," he said after they had eaten in silence for several minutes. "The West isn't for everyone, it's hard country, and it asks a lot of those who try to make a life here." "But you love it," she observed. "Despite everything it's taken from you." He nodded slowly. "I love the possibility of it. Every morning I look out at the mountains and feel like I'm seeing something no other man has ever truly seen before, at least not in exactly that light, that moment. There's a freedom here that I never found back east." "Freedom and security are often at odds," Zara said softly. "I suppose we each choose the one we need most." Thomas studied her face, wondering if she was right, if they were simply two people with fundamentally different needs, destined to go their separate ways. But something in him rebelled at the thought. The connection between them wasn't so easily categorized or dismissed. "What if we could have both?" he asked. "Security and freedom." Her smile was sad. "A lovely thought, but I haven't seen evidence that such a thing exists." The remainder of their meal passed with careful conversation about neutral topics: the unusually cold weather, the Christmas preparations around town, news from the territorial governor. It was pleasant but distant, as if they were already practicing for a future in which they were nothing more than memories to each other. When the meal was finished, Thomas insisted on walking her back to her lodgings, despite her protests that it wasn't necessary. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered like diamond dust across the black sky. Their breath formed clouds in the frigid air as they walked side by side, not touching but acutely aware of each other's presence. "Will you write?" Thomas asked as they reached the stairs leading to her room. "Would that make it easier or harder?" she countered. "Harder," he admitted, "but I'd still like to know you're well." She nodded, her face half hidden in shadow. "I'll send a letter when I'm settled, just to let you know I arrived safely." An awkward silence fell between them. This was the moment for a proper goodbye, yet neither seemed able to find the right words. Well, she said finally, thank you for dinner, it was lovely. Zara, he stepped closer, then stopped himself. What right did he have to ask her to stay when he had never given her reason to believe he could offer what she needed? Safe travels tomorrow, I hope you find what you're looking for in Philadelphia. She held his gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then she turned and hurried up the stairs, disappearing into the millinery shop without looking back. Thomas stood in the street long after she was gone, snow beginning to fall gently around him, wondering why the right decision felt so utterly wrong. Dawn broke cold and clear on December 22nd. Zara finished packing the last of her belongings, her movements methodical despite the heaviness in her chest. Mrs. Peterson had already brought up hot water for washing and a light breakfast, which Zara had barely touched. Her appetite had abandoned her, along with her certainty that leaving was the right decision. The dinner with Thomas had only deepened her confusion. She had expected him to try to convince her to stay, perhaps even to declare feelings he had never spoken aloud before. Instead, he had been understanding, reasonable, accepting her decision with a grace that both relieved and disappointed her. Perhaps he wasn't as invested in whatever had grown between them as she had imagined. Perhaps she was saving herself from greater heartbreak by leaving now. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Mrs. Peterson with the bill for her final week's lodging. Instead, Sheriff Davies appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. "Miss Keller, good morning." "Sheriff," she straightened, alarm flickering through her. "Is something wrong?" The older man twisted his hat in his hands. "I'm afraid so, ma'am. There's been an accident out at the C-Bar-C." The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "Thomas, is he?" "He's alive," the sheriff said quickly, "but he's been hurt. Bad fall while checking fence lines in the north pasture. His ranch hand found him this morning and rode for the doctor, but Calloway's asking for you." "For me?" Zara whispered. "Yes, ma'am," quite insistent about it, according to the hand. The sheriff gestured to the window, where snow was beginning to fall more heavily. "I've got a wagon outside. Dr. Morgan asked me to fetch you, said we shouldn't waste time, the weather's turning." Zara looked at her packed trunk, at the ticket to Philadelphia laid carefully on top. The eastbound train would depart in less than 2 hours. "I'll get my coat," she said. The journey to the C-Bar-C took nearly an hour through increasingly heavy snow. Sheriff Davies kept the horses at a steady pace, but the road was growing slick, and visibility worsened with each passing mile. Zara sat beside him, rigid with tension, 1,000 questions racing through her mind. How badly was Thomas hurt? Why had he asked for her? And what would she say to him, knowing she was still planning to board that train the moment she was assured of his recovery? The ranch came into view through the swirling snow, a sturdy main house built of local stone and timber, a large barn and several outbuildings. It was more substantial than Zara had imagined, having never visited before. Thomas had spoken of it as a work in progress, but what she saw before her looked solid, permanent. A young man hurried out to meet the wagon as they pulled up to the house. "Sheriff, Miss Keller." "Doc's with him inside." "How is he, Jimmy?" the sheriff asked as he helped Zara down. "Busted leg for sure, maybe some ribs too. He was out there all night in the cold before I found him this morning." Jimmy looked at Zara with open curiosity. "He's been asking for you, ma'am." Zara followed Jimmy into the house, struck by the unexpected warmth of the interior. The main room was furnished simply but comfortably, with a large stone fireplace, sturdy wooden furniture, and bookshelves lining one wall. This was not the sparse bachelor quarters she had imagined, but a real home, thoughtfully arranged. Dr. Morgan emerged from a doorway at the back of the room, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Miss Keller. Thank you for coming so quickly." "How is he?" she asked, removing her snow-dusted coat. "Broken leg, 2 cracked ribs, various cuts and bruises. The exposure is what concerns me most. He was out in the cold for hours." "He's running a fever," the doctor shook his head. "He'll recover, but it won't be quick. The leg was a bad break." "May I see him?" "Of course, he's been asking for you since he regained consciousness. But keep it brief, he needs rest." She nodded and moved past the doctor into what appeared to be Thomas's bedroom. It was a good-sized room, dominated by a large bed where Thomas lay, his face pale against the pillows, his right leg splinted and bandaged. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. Zara approached quietly, taking in the details of the room: more bookshelves, a writing desk near the window, a trunk at the foot of the bed. Everything neat and organized, unlike the temporary quarters of a man just passing through. "Thomas," she said softly, sitting in the chair beside the bed, his eyes opened slowly, focusing on her with obvious effort. "Zara. You came." His voice was rough, strained. "Of course I came." She reached for his hand without thinking, finding it too warm. "The fever the doctor had mentioned. What happened?" "Checking fence lines. Horse spooked at something, threw me down a ravine." He attempted a smile that turned into a grimace. "Not my finest moment. You should have had Jimmy with you." "He was fixing the roof on the eastern barn." Thomas squeezed her hand weakly. "Your train, what time?" "Don't worry about that now." His eyes, bright with fever, searched her face. "You're still leaving." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes. Once I know you're going to be all right." "I'm sorry," he said, his voice fading. "Didn't mean to delay you." "You didn't do this on purpose, Thomas," she said with a small smile. "At least I hope not. It would be a rather dramatic way to keep me from the train." "Wouldn't do that." His eyes drifted closed. "Want you to be happy, even if it's not here." Before she could respond, Dr. Morgan appeared in the doorway. "He needs to rest now, Miss Keller. The fever should break by tomorrow if we're lucky." She nodded and gently released Thomas's hand, noting that he had already drifted into sleep or unconsciousness. "What does he need, care-wise?" "The leg needs to be kept immobile. The bandages on his ribs will need changing every day. Cool compresses for the fever." The doctor studied her face. "Jimmy can handle it, or I can send one of the women from town out to nurse him. Mrs. Peterson, perhaps, or the widow Johnston." Zara looked back at Thomas's pale face. "I'll stay," she heard herself say, "at least until the fever breaks." The doctor nodded, unsurprised. "I thought you might. I've left medicines and instructions with Jimmy. I'll try to get back out tomorrow, weather permitting." He glanced toward the window, where snow continued to fall heavily. "Though from the look of things, we might all be staying put for a day or two. This storm's turning into a real blizzard." After the doctor left, with Sheriff Davies driving him back to town, Zara found herself alone in the house with Jimmy and the unconscious Thomas. The young ranch hand showed her where everything was kept: the kitchen supplies, linens, medicines, and then excused himself to tend to the animals in the barn. "I'll be back to check on the boss in a couple hours," he promised. "You need anything, just holler from the porch." Zara removed her traveling dress, now impractical for nursing duties, and found a simple cotton work dress in her trunk. She tied an apron around her waist and set about making herself useful, preparing broth in the kitchen and gathering clean cloths for compresses. As she worked, she found herself studying the house more closely. The bookshelves were filled with volumes on cattle breeding, Western geography, and literature, including several books of poetry she had mentioned to Thomas in their conversations. The pantry was well stocked with preserved foods. There were curtains on the windows, a colorful rug before the hearth. None of it matched the picture Thomas had painted of himself as a man just passing through, a man for whom the ranch was simply one step on an endless journey west. This was the home of someone planning to stay. When she returned to Thomas's bedside with cool compresses for his fever, she found him awake but disoriented. "The cattle," he murmured as she placed a compress on his forehead. "Need to move them to the southern pasture before the storm." "Jimmy has taken care of the animals," she assured him. "Everything is fine." His eyes, bright with fever, focused on her face. "Zara, why are you here?" "Your train." "The storm is too bad for travel," she said, which wasn't entirely untrue. "I'm staying to help until you're better." "No," he said, trying to sit up and falling back with a groan of pain. "You need to go. Find your security." "Lie still," she scolded gently. "You'll hurt yourself worse." He caught her wrist with surprising strength. "Promise me something." "What?" "When the storm passes, you'll go. Don't stay out of pity or obligation." The intensity in his eyes surprised her. "I promise," she said softly. "Now rest." The day passed slowly as the storm intensified outside. Zara divided her time between tending to Thomas, changing compresses, coaxing him to swallow broth and medicine when he was conscious enough, and exploring the house that so contradicted her understanding of the man. In a desk drawer, she found plans for expanding the main house, detailed drawings for additional bedrooms, a larger kitchen, even a small room labeled schoolroom. The dates on the plans showed they had been drawn up shortly after she had arrived in Clearwater Creek. In the kitchen, she discovered a crate of items recently purchased from the general store: teacups of fine china, a set of women's gardening tools, seeds for a flower garden, things no bachelor rancher would buy for himself. And in the small study off the main room, she found a letter half-written on the desk, addressed to her. The date at the top was December 20, the day before she had given him her goodbye note. "Dearest Zara," it began. "I have never been a man of many words, especially when it comes to matters of the heart, but I can no longer remain silent about my feelings for you. From the moment you stepped off the stage in Clearwater Creek, something in me recognized something in you, a kindred spirit, perhaps, or simply the woman I have been waiting for without knowing I was waiting." The letter continued, speaking of his admiration for her intelligence, her gentle strength, the way she had created a real school for the town's children where before there had been only haphazard attempts at education. It spoke of his hopes for the future, his plans for the ranch, plans that included space for a family. "I know you value security above all," the letter read, "and I have been afraid to offer you a life that might seem precarious by Eastern standards. But I want you to know that while nothing in this world is guaranteed, my commitment to building a life here, a life I hope you will consider sharing, is absolute. I am not passing through, Zara, I am home. And I believe you could be too, if you are willing to take that risk with me." The letter ended there, unfinished. She wondered if he had planned to give it to her at their dinner, before discovering her own goodbye note. The thought sent a pang of regret through her so sharp it was almost physical pain. She returned to his bedside, watching the rise and fall of his chest as he slept fitfully. Outside, the storm howled, snow piling against the windows. The Eastern train would be long gone by now, stranding her here even if she had chosen to leave. But had she really chosen to leave, or had she been running from the very thing she claimed to want most, the chance to build something permanent, something that would last? Night fell and Jimmy returned to the house with news that all the animals were secured and an offer to sit with Thomas while Zara rested. She declined, too restless to sleep. Instead, she kept her vigil beside the bed, changing compresses and monitoring Thomas's fever, which seemed to be worsening despite the doctor's medicines. In his delirium, Thomas spoke of things she had never heard him mention before: his parents' deaths in the flood, his years of drifting from ranch to ranch before finding this land, his fears of putting down roots only to have them ripped away again. "Can't lose it all again," he murmured at one point, his hand clutching at the blankets. "Can't lose her too." "Shh," Zara soothed, placing a fresh compress on his forehead. "You're not going to lose anything. Rest now." As the night deepened, his fever reached a crisis point. His skin burned beneath her touch, his breathing became labored, and he thrashed against the bedclothes, endangering his splinted leg. Zara sent Jimmy to the barn to pack snow into buckets, which she used to create cold compresses for Thomas's body. Hour after hour, she fought to bring the fever down, speaking to him continuously, though she had no idea if he could hear her. "You have to fight, Thomas," she urged, bathing his face with cool water. "This ranch needs you, the town needs you." She hesitated, then added in a whisper, "I need you." Near dawn, the fever finally broke. Thomas's breathing eased, his restless movements stilled, and his skin, though still warm, lost the frightening heat of the worst hours. Exhausted, Zara laid her head on the edge of the bed and closed her eyes for what she intended to be just a moment. She woke to the sensation of fingers gently stroking her hair. Disoriented, she lifted her head to find Thomas watching her, his eyes clear of fever for the first time since she had arrived. "You're still here," he said hoarsely. "Where else would I be?" She asked, straightening and pushing her hair back from her face. "Philadelphia, or on your way there." He studied her face. "How long have I been out of my head?" "About a day and a half." "Your fever broke this morning." She reached for the water glass on the bedside table. "You should drink something." He allowed her to help him take a few sips, then settled back against the pillows with a grimace of pain. "The storm. Still going strong. We have about 3 feet of snow outside, according to Jimmy." She adjusted the blanket over his chest. "The doctor will try to make it out today if the weather lets up." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. I remember bits and pieces. You were here the whole time. Yes. Thank you, he hesitated. I also remember asking you to promise that you would leave when the storm passed. Not to stay out of obligation. You did ask that, she met his gaze steadily, and I'm not staying out of obligation. A look of cautious hope crossed his features. Then why? Instead of answering directly, she said, I found your letter. The one you were writing to me. His expression changed to one of vulnerability she had never seen before. Ah, that. Did you mean what you wrote, about being home, not just passing through? Every word, his voice was low but firm. I should have told you sooner, shown you sooner. Why didn't you? He was silent for a moment, considering. The same reason you were leaving without saying goodbye, I think, fear. His hand sought hers on the bed covers. I've spent most of my life believing that the only way to survive out here is to be ready to leave everything behind at a moment's notice. To never become so attached to any place or, his fingers tightened around hers, any person that losing them would destroy you. And now, she asked softly. Now I understand that's no way to live, it's just a way to avoid living. His blue eyes held hers. I love you, Zara. I've been building this place with you in mind since the day I met you, hoping I would find the courage to ask you to share it with me. Not just the ranch as it is now, but what it could become. What we could make of it together. The words she had longed to hear, had feared to hope for, hung in the air between them. Zara's heart pounded in her chest as she considered all they implied, a future here, in this place she had been prepared to leave. A life with this man who had finally revealed his heart to her. I thought the West could never offer the security I wanted, she said slowly. But I was looking for security in the wrong places, in buildings that can't burn, in towns that won't disappear. Real security isn't about places at all. What is it about? Thomas asked, though his eyes suggested he already knew her answer. It's about having someone to face the uncertainty with. Someone who makes a promise and keeps it, even when the world around you changes. She squeezed his hand. I love you too, Thomas. I think I have since the beginning. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Does that mean you're staying? It means I'm home, she said simply and leaned down to press her lips gently to his. Outside, the storm began to abate, snow giving way to clear winter sunshine that sparkled across the transformed landscape. Inside, plans were already taking shape for healing, for building, for a spring wedding when the mountains turned green again. 3 days later, Christmas morning dawned bright and clear over the C ranch. The snow lay deep across the valley, transforming the landscape into a glistening wonderland under the brilliant Colorado sun. Inside the ranch house, a small fir tree cut from the northern ridge stood in the corner of the main room, decorated with paper stars Zara had fashioned, and candles Thomas insisted they light just for a little while. It's Christmas, after all. Thomas sat in a chair by the fire, his splinted leg propped on a footstool, watching as Zara arranged presents beneath the tree. Dr. Morgan had pronounced him on the mend yesterday, though the broken leg would keep him largely housebound for at least 6 weeks. The cracked ribs were painful but healing, and the fever had not returned. You didn't need to get me anything, Zara protested as she picked up the small package he'd had Jimmy retrieve from its hiding place in the barn. Especially since I gave you quite a scare with my almost departure. That was the best gift you could have given me, deciding to stay. His blue eyes were warm as they followed her movements. But I had this made for you weeks ago. I've just been waiting for the right moment to give it to you. Curious, she unwrapped the package to reveal a small wooden box, beautifully carved with a pattern of mountain flowers. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a gold ring with a single perfect diamond that caught the morning light. Thomas, she breathed, looking up to find him watching her with an expression of such tender hope that it made her heart swell. I had planned to ask you at the Christmas celebration in town, he said, before I found your goodbye note, then I thought I'd lost my chance entirely. He reached for her hand. Zara Keller, I love you. I want to build a life with you here, a permanent, lasting life. Will you marry me? Joy bubbled up within her as she knelt carefully beside his chair, mindful of his injured leg. Yes, she said simply. Yes, with all my heart. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that promised a lifetime of such moments. quiet joys shared between two people who had found in each other the courage to believe in permanence, even in a world full of uncertainty. When they finally drew apart, Zara rested her head against his shoulder. "I have a confession to make," she said. "What's that?" "I do have a gift for you." She rose and went to the desk, returning with an envelope. "It's not much, but—" Thomas opened it curiously, unfolding the paper inside. It was her resignation letter to the school board, dated that morning. At the bottom, she had written a new line: "I hereby withdraw my resignation and commit to continuing as Clearwater Creek's teacher for the coming year, with the board's approval." "You're going to keep teaching?" he asked, looking up at her with surprise. "Those children need a good education, especially with the town growing the way it is," she said. And she gestured toward the window, where the sea spread white and glistening before them. "It's only a 10-mile ride. We can manage it." "We certainly can." His smile was radiant. "Besides, we'll need a good teacher for our own children someday." The thought of children, their children, filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the crackling fire. She had come west seeking security and had found something far more valuable: the courage to build a life on love, knowing that while nothing was guaranteed, some things were worth the risk. Outside the window, she could see Jimmy approaching on horseback, likely coming to check on Thomas and join them for Christmas dinner as they had invited him to do. Beyond him, the mountains stood eternal against the brilliant blue sky, and the ranch, their ranch now, spread in all directions, a promise of the future they would create together. By Christmas morning, Zara knew with absolute certainty that she had found her home, not in the safety of eastern cities, but here in the West, with Thomas. In his arms, in his love, she had discovered the truest security of all. The knowledge that whatever challenges came their way, they would face them together, building a life as strong and enduring as the mountains that surrounded them.